Welcome, dear listeners, to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the annals of time, uncovering the hidden narratives that shape our understanding of the world. Today, we find ourselves in the midst of 18th century Britain, where the seeds of revolution were sown, and the fate of empires hung in the balance. Our topic for today is the Stamp Act of 1765, a pivotal moment in the chronicle of American history. As we delve into the origins of this seminal event, let us first set the stage. Imagine yourself standing on the bustling streets of London, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of merchants, traders, and politicians. The year is 1764, and the British Empire, still reeling from the expenses of the 7 Years' War, seeks to consolidate its power and replenish its coffers. It is amidst this backdrop of fiscal urgency that the idea of a stamp tax begins to take shape. In the halls of Parliament, men like George Grenville, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Charles Townshend, the Chancellor of the Board of Trade, were instrumental in shaping the policy that would eventually become the Stamp Act. On February 6, 1765, Grenville introduced the bill to Parliament, proposing that it would come into effect on November 1, 1765. The act required that all printed materials, including newspapers, pamphlets, and even playing cards, bear a tax stamp to indicate that the tax had been paid. As we explore the earliest history of the Stamp Act, it becomes clear that the seeds of resistance were sown long before the act's implementation. The colonists had grown accustomed to a system of self-governance and felt that the imposition of taxes without their consent was a direct threat to their rights as British subjects. This sentiment would soon give rise to a wave of protests, boycotts, and rallies that would spread throughout the colonies. In the summer of 1764, the British government had passed the Sugar Act, which imposed duties on sugar, wine, and other goods imported into the colonies. The colonists saw this as an attempt to exert greater control over their economic affairs, and responded with widespread protests. The Stamp Act was seen as a further escalation of this trend, and the colonists were determined to resist it. As we navigate the complex web of events that led to the Stamp Act, we find ourselves in the midst of a maelstrom of competing interests and ideologies. The British government saw the act as a necessary measure to help pay for the maintenance of British troops in the colonies and to offset the costs associated with the administration of the colonies. The colonists, on the other hand, saw it as an attack on their rights and liberties. The historical context of the Stamp Act is also deeply intertwined with the geographic landscape of the time. The Appalachian Mountains, which stretched from Canada to Alabama, formed a natural barrier between the eastern seaboard and the western frontier. This divide would play a significant role in shaping the colonists' response to the Stamp Act, as those living on the western frontier felt a greater sense of disconnection from the British government. As we proceed with caution, tracing the intricate web of events, personalities, and ideologies that gave rise to this pivotal moment, we find ourselves at the threshold of a new era in American history. The seeds of revolution have been sown, and the stage is set for a confrontation that will forever alter the course of history. And so, dear listeners, let us proceed with our journey. Welcome back to History with Herodotus, where we're exploring the tumultuous reign of the Stamp Act of 1765. Imagine yourself standing on the streets of Boston, surrounded by the sounds of protest and dissent. The year is 1765, and the colonies are abuzz with opposition to the Stamp Act. In Massachusetts, a group of merchants and traders, led by Samuel Adams and James Otis, had formed the Sons of Liberty, a radical organization determined to resist the act through any means necessary. They organized boycotts, rallies, and protests, using their charismatic leadership to whip up public sentiment against the British government. One of the most significant events of this period was the Stamp Act Congress, which convened in New York City on October 7, 1765. Representatives from 9 colonies gathered to coordinate a unified response to the act, drafting a statement of grievances and petitioning the British government for repeal. This Congress marked a crucial turning point in American history, as it laid the groundwork for future colonial cooperation and resistance against British rule. As we explore the colonists' resistance, It becomes clear that their opposition was not just about taxes, but about fundamental principles of liberty and representation. The idea that they had no say in the matter, that they were being forced to pay taxes without their consent, struck at the very heart of their notion of self-governance. This sentiment was eloquently expressed by Patrick Henry, who declared, "If this be treason, make the most of it," as he advocated for resistance against the British government. The British government, however, remained resolute in its determination to enforce the Stamp Act. In response to growing unrest, they dispatched troops to the colonies, which only served to further inflame tensions. The presence of these troops, often quartered in the homes of colonists, became a source of great resentment and helped to galvanize opposition to the act. As we navigate the complex web of events that unfolded during this period, it's essential to consider the role of key figures like Benjamin Franklin, who played a crucial part in shaping public opinion against the Stamp Act. Franklin's writings, particularly his essay A Modest Inquiry into the Nature and Necessity of a Paper Currency, helped to articulate the colonists' grievances and provided a powerful voice for their resistance. The geographic landscape of the colonies also played a significant role in shaping the resistance movement. The Appalachian Mountains, which formed a natural barrier between the eastern seaboard and the western frontier, allowed for the development of distinct regional identities and interests. This divide would eventually contribute to the emergence of different factions within the resistance movement, each with their own unique perspectives and agendas. As we reach the pinnacle of the colonists' resistance, it's clear that the Stamp Act had become a catalyst for a broader movement, one that would ultimately give rise to the American Revolution. The Act's repeal in 1766, although a significant victory for the colonists, would not quell the growing tensions between the colonies and Great Britain. Instead, it would set the stage for future conflicts, including the Townshend Acts and the Boston Massacre, which would ultimately lead to the outbreak of war in 1775. The seeds of revolution have taken root, and the stage is set for a confrontation that will forever alter the course of history. Join us next time on History with Herodotus as we delve into the fascinating story of how the Stamp Act's repeal paved the way for the birth of a new nation. Welcome back to History with Herodotus, where we're concluding our exploration of the Stamp Act of 1765. As we previously discussed, the Act's repeal in 1766 marked a significant victory for the colonists, but it did not quell the growing tensions between the colonies and Great Britain. The repeal of the Stamp Act was met with widespread celebration throughout the colonies. However, the British government's attempt to exert control over the colonies had already set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to the outbreak of war in 1775. The Townshend Acts, which imposed taxes on goods such as glass, paint, and paper, were enacted in 1767 and further fueled the colonists' resistance. One of the key consequences of the Stamp Act was the emergence of a unified colonial identity. The Act's repeal had demonstrated that collective action could be effective in resisting British rule, and this realization helped to galvanize support for the Patriot cause. As Thomas Paine would later write in his influential pamphlet Common Sense, "The blood of the martyrs will water the tree of liberty." This sentiment reflected the growing sense of shared purpose and determination among the colonists. The decline of the Stamp Act also marked a significant shift in British policy towards the colonies. The British government, realizing that its attempts to exert control through taxation had been unsuccessful, began to focus on more subtle forms of coercion. The Quartering Act, which required colonists to provide housing for British soldiers, was enacted in 1765 and became a major source of resentment among the population. As we explore the aftermath of the Stamp Act, it's essential to consider the role of key figures like George Washington, who would eventually become the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. Washington's experiences during this period, particularly his involvement in the Virginia House of Burgesses, helped shape his views on British rule and the need for colonial resistance. The legacy of the Stamp Act can be seen in the many ways it shaped the course of American history. The Act's emphasis on taxation without representation helped to establish the principle of no taxation without consent, which would become a cornerstone of American democracy. Additionally, the Act's repeal demonstrated that collective action and resistance could be effective in achieving political change, a lesson that would be applied throughout American history. In conclusion, the Stamp Act of 1765 was a pivotal moment in American history, marking the beginning of a long process of resistance and rebellion against British rule. As we reflect on the decline and aftermath of this act, it's clear that its legacy continues to shape our understanding of American democracy and the principles of liberty and representation. As Patrick Henry so eloquently stated, "Give me liberty or give me death." This sentiment, born out of the resistance to the Stamp Act, would become a rallying cry for the American Revolution and continue to inspire generations of Americans to fight for their freedom and rights. And so, dear listeners, as we conclude our journey through the Stamp Act's tumultuous reign, we hope that you've gained a deeper understanding of this pivotal moment in American history. Join us next time on History with Herodotus as we explore more fascinating stories from the past. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first understand the past.